we're going to get started as people begin to flow in. And today is the 188th Security Thought Leadership webinar. Those of you who attend regularly will know that the object of this thought leadership is to critique today what is going on in order that we may get a better type of security tomorrow. The idea is not to try and solve the world's problems here, but to try and find a way of thinking about what the issues are and how we should begin to engage with them. And the topic today is about robots, a security opportunity or a security threat. And I must say, I've been greatly guided by Chris Pele of the School of Criminal Justice at the University of South Africa. Thank you very much indeed to him and indeed to the university for encouraging me to do it and helping in the putting of it all together. And as you all know, what we're going to do now is we're going to introduce our three panelists. And once they've introduced themselves, I will then come back and I'll invite each of them to make an opening statement. 3 minutes when they get to say whatever they want to say about this topic. Once that's done, we'll invite some questions. And if you do want to ask a question, please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen, and we will seek to engage you in the discussion as soon as the panelists have finished their opening statements. So without further ado then, let's go and meet our first panelist. And Andrew, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Martin, and thanks for having me. I'm Andrew Seldon. I'm the editor of Smart Security Solutions in South Africa. We cover security, risk, and a bit of facilities management generally throughout the year. And we've just completed our Smart Surveillance Handbook, which actually has some things in it which are going to relate to this webinar. And that's about it, y'all. The handbook will only be out next week, but here we go. Thank you.
Look out for it then. Thank you very much indeed. Shandré, over to you. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Martin. My name is Shandré, and I'm an associate professor from the University of South Africa, and I work in the Department of Criminology and Security Science. So pleased to be here.
Shandré, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Great to have you. And our final panelist is Craig. Craig, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Martin. Glad to be here. Thank you for the invite. I'm Craig Donald. I'm an organizational psychologist with a specialist focus in human factors and surveillance systems. I do a lot of training internationally on crime behavior analysis and detection. And I'm an adjunct associate professor at Edith Cowan University in Perth, although I live in Joburg in a very high crime environment.
Wow. All good qualifications, Craig, for this webinar. Well, thank you very much indeed. Then now, as you can see, three panelists coming at this from different direction with different expertise. We're now going to hear what they've got to say at this topic. 3 minutes when they can express their views. Don't forget, if you have got a question, do use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. As soon as the panelists have finished their opening statements, we'll involve you in the discussion. So without further ado, Andrew, back to you and your opening statement, please.
Thank you. Yeah, this is really an interesting topic for conversation. And from my perspective, I see the scope for robots, taking over the security industry in, let's say, a 7-year period from now, pretty much limited. There will be some job losses, and there will be a few areas where robots actually can do a lot of good, like, patrolling hazardous areas. But I think that'll be pretty limited because, if you're in a hazardous area, the robot has to be intrinsically safe and all that kind of stuff. Maybe for bomb disposal, it'll be a good thing there. As far as, if I can call it, regular security is concerned, I think the scope for robots is pretty limited. If we're talking about automated machines which walk around and drive around and, take over what guards today do. However, perhaps the possible exception is drones. But however, I think the real threat to the security industry in terms of jobs and automation taking over from people is in the software that drives technology, whether it's a robot or, to use an example, cameras or other security technologies. AI is very hyped up today, and there's a lot of talk about it. But the AI, the software, within cameras or on servers or in the cloud, will be where the real threat comes from, for human employment, if I can put it that way. as an example, if you look at cameras, a camera, you know, a robot or a person patrolling a perimeter only has a limited scope of what it's doing or something like that. And I think that, you know, if you look at cameras on the perimeter with the relative AI in the camera or servers or wherever it is, that can patrol the entire perimeter 24/7. And although right now we have a lot of false alarm rates with, you know, the current AI systems, which aren't as good as people say, but the thing with AI is that it learns. And as that learning is applied to more areas, you know, whether it's perimeter or monitoring inside a warehouse after dark or whatever the case may be, that's where as I say, the real threats will come from, and where the real problem for employment may be in the future. The only safe job I can see, I've just randomly picked a 7-year scope as the future, will be in the tactical response teams or the armed response teams, because robots can't really actually go and take over the job of detaining and dealing with people at the moment. Post 7 years, who knows what will happen, but that's my 3-minute take.
Thank you very much indeed, and some fascinating points there, and certainly some food for thought. And don't forget, if you have got a question, do please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Okay, let's now go to Shandré. Shandré, your opening statement, please.
Thanks, Martin. Excuse me. Robots and AI and automation have shown
Shandré,
us...
we can't see you.
Oh, sorry, Martin, if you don't mind, because I'm coughing.
Okay, okay, fine. You carry on. Yeah, you carry on.
Apologies for that, everyone. I'll go back to my camera. Robots, artificial intelligence, and automation have shown us, like Andrew has said.
Shandré, I'm so sorry, we can't hear you. Very well. Can you just get closer to your microphone?
Okay, is this better now?
A little bit better, but still a bit quiet.
I have my speakers on its highest.
You're
Okay,
fine just now.
You see, Martin, I should get a few more minutes.
That's okay.
Okay. Is this clearer now?
Yes, it's clearer. Let's go with that.
Okay. We have seen that robots and everything that comes with it has a range of benefits, such as social, economic development, education, and what we're here for today, the security benefits. The proper deployment of AI and robots can allow people to reap the benefits of technology, but it must be managed carefully. We also have to know that robots in the workplace is important to gauge what are people's attitudes about it in the instance that they are working with it. Then, like my colleague mentioned before, the media frequently emphasizes that automation will render humans obsolete. In fact, it is projected that in 14% of organizations or countries for economic cooperation, of which South Africa is a member, employment is at risk to automation. Automation and robots are creating new, more innovative career opportunities. It's also reshaping security to be more intelligent and safer, not only in terms of production processes, but also in terms of human labor. According to a global survey on perception surrounding crime in Tshwane and Joburg here in Gauteng, South Africa, they are listed as the 3rd and 4th most dangerous cities in the world. The South African crime statistics of 2022 and 2023 report an increase in contact crime by 18.5%, sexual offences by 11%, and serious crimes by 19.19%. So these crime statistics show us that we do need innovative security measures. And like Andrew also said, there is a space for robots being used in the police and security roles, particularly when it comes to neutralizing offenders in high-risk areas that can lead to the loss of life. Israeli police are known to have employed drones along with other armed tear gas to fight Gaza protests. Even here in South Africa, police have known to use armed skunk drones, which are armed with pepper spray. Then, like we have mentioned, there are numerous risks in robotics, such as lack of confidentiality, lack of privacy, lack of self-healing processes that are not done properly. Not to mention the energy crisis that we face in South Africa. Despite backup systems being put into place, uninterrupted service, these systems are failing due to large blackouts that we face here in South Africa. And it's increasing the vulnerability to South Africa's safety and security. Finally, South Africa must consider using an Afrocentric lens when implementing robotic, AI, and automated solutions. Afrocentricity maintains that the needs of Africans cannot be broadly interpreted by people outside of Africa. Research should centralize the importance of African principles, culture, history, and values when implementing new technologies in African communities. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you very much indeed. It all got better in the end there, the sound, by the way, Shandré. So that was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Finally, let's go to Craig. Craig, interesting what you've got to say on this topic. Over to you.
All right, I think we're dealing with stereotypes. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
All right, good. I think we're dealing with stereotypes of both security and of robotics. The security image is typically of an enforcer or a protector, but in fact, there's a lot of public relations that goes into the job, problem solving, conflict resolution, counseling at times. It's very different from just a robot standing in front of something or preventing somebody from moving. Robots are seen to be potentially good at everything. They're not. They are typically exceptionally good at a very limited range of activities. It's like people with a PhD. With all respect, Martin, you seem to have diversified. So robots work within very defined environments, and the broader the context and options, the more difficult it is. They have a great role as part of an augmented surveillance, delivering information to a control room, in my view. But I saw a robot dog being shown at an exhibition recently, and it moved from side to side, it walked, it even had a wiggle to it, and everybody went, oh, cute. But the bottom line is that it just provided a camera view to somebody sitting in a control room. My German Shepherd is a lot better at spotting somebody pointing a gun at me and doing something about it, although that also takes a lot of training. So people talk about AI and learning and totally underestimate the requirements. It actually requires a huge amount of human effort to teach machine learning to AI. And that is still typically not based on representations found in the wild, so to speak. So one size does not fit all with robots. It's very environmentally dependent, and it has to be customized. So they don't have the same situational awareness and intuition of humans and the ability to view things in context. So a fundamental limitation, unless intelligence goes up substantially, approximating humans or dogs for that matter. We already have criminals outpacing security and looking at ways around protection and coming up with novel and unorthodox ways of stealing and committing crime. So can a robot keep up if we can't? I think that's a really critical question in terms of outcomes. Cyber crime skills are devolving across the security landscape in terms of software and hardware that drive our security systems. Already we have crime syndicates intimidating security officers. We have them intimidating control room operators. We're having them intimidate installers and maintenance technicians. And more recently, getting into the people who actually develop and provide the platforms for security for us as well. So syndicates are already jamming operations of all kinds, cameras and various other things. And we now have jammer detections on various sites and vehicles to actually spot when people are trying to do this. But how do you get around that with a robotic system? I think the maintenance requirements for robots is also totally underestimated from a time and cost point of view. Never mind preserving the integrity of the robots and the system that is being used. So ask your provider, if you are provided with something like that, if they will cover all costs of maintenance and legal issues of use, and see what they have to say. I'm sure you're going to get some interesting responses. So robots and AI have huge potential to analyze and enhance security data collection and analysis and to augment surveillance by people. But I also think something like ChatGPT is not the typical model of what we're facing and working with security robots. We don't have self-thinking automated robots that can make autonomous decisions. We do have loitering munition drones, but that's military rather than security, thank goodness. If we did have these automated thinking robots, they would probably still have to be very specific. If not, then I do think science fiction has already shown some of the paths which it can lead to. So that's my 5 cents.
Wow, absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Three very different viewpoints and 3 very different insights on the topic. Let's come to some questions then. Now, in advance of this webinar, I got 2 emails actually, both basically saying the same thing. Well, I can't be today and I'll catch up on the recording on the website afterwards, but both making this point about making sure the panel cover the potential of all this. And I'll tell you what runs through each of your comments is the limited potential of it. I mean, the fact that it's got a very sort of limited use, and you all in your different ways have made that point. I wonder whether I could ask each of you to comment on this. Some of the dangers here. And Craig, you alerted to this point earlier about offenders, and I go into prisons here and I speak to offenders. And one of the things about speaking to offenders is they're always looking for the opportunity. They're always speaking to each other about they get ahead of the game. And I just wonder whether there's what you would see as the major weakness from a security point of view in this role. What are the dangers we should be thinking about? Andrew first.
Okay, the dangers are, I think it was mentioned already by Craig, relying on the robots or AI to do the job without any human sort of backup or support. We've had a lot of cases where, you know, companies will say there's 100% or 98% chance that they'll catch all the alarms or events and what have you. And when it's actually rolled out in the real world, that turns out to be, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20%, because, you know, what happens in the lab is very different from what happens in the real world. And I think over-reliance on the AI or the robot is one of the major problems. And as Craig also mentioned, the training, you know, some robots or AI trained in China or Europe is not going to be as effective in Africa, as Shandré said, as it would have been, or as it would be in Berlin or London or wherever it might be. So the training and the over-reliance and trying to over get rid of humans, terrible way to put it, but are 2 of the dangers which I think are really going to affect us and going to cause problems as more AI and robots sort of hit the market.
Thank you. Really interesting. I mean, Shandré, you pointed out the dilemma in some countries. You chose South Africa as a case in point, quite understandably, about the high crime rate. I mean, one of the interesting things for me is how sometimes security measures can work in the interest of offenders. They use them to their own advantage, either in terms of people feeling secure they've got them when in fact they shouldn't do, or indeed by manipulating them in some way. Do you see dangers here in the way the criminal world, I mean, because what's good for crime prevention can also be good for criminals too. Is there a danger of robots working in the interest of criminals more than in the interest of the defenders?
Thanks, Martin. I think that's such a critical question, because it could be that our offenders are, or people who want to participate in crime, they are very savvy and they want to also get ahead of the game and use these things to their advantage. And also, like I mentioned, my case study, South Africa, or even in an African context, we must also think of the way things operate in Africa or a developing country like ourselves. For instance, Amazon, who has a fully automated shop, would that necessarily work in a country like ours or in another African country or developing country? Because we are not as prone to the honesty policy as European countries are, or certain areas are. So it's definitely something that can be used to the advantage of criminals, and they can get ahead of this as well.
Okay, thank you very much. We just slightly lost you at the end there, but we got the gist of what you were saying. Craig, come to you on this. Of course, you outlined some of the sort of pros and cons here. I guess, what are you most worried about, Craig, or what should we be most worried about with this robots?
You gave me a really hard one, Martin. I think it's got huge potential to provide information analytics to give us insights. I think the problem is that robots don't think very innovatively and laterally. And I've had enough problems with my airline company trying to change my tickets with a bot online and saying, I don't understand, can you repeat your question, that kind of stuff. There's a communication issue somewhere there. And also, robots require some kind of recognition in order to react to a situation. And if that recognition is not clearly defined, people can take advantage of it in terms of your criminals, as you were talking about, employing strategies. It can reduce the possible options, or worst case, it can actually lead to a robot doing something that it thinks is a threat, but which is not, and then somebody is harmed as a consequence of that. We have a lot of false alarms when we come to AI systems, and false alarms can lead to bad outcomes. And if that's going to happen, then we really need to keep a tight rein on it.
Yeah, okay, interesting point. Let's go to some of these questions. I'm going to come to Mike Gibbs first. Now, Mike's a former panelist, actually. He's been on a couple of panels in history. And he asked a question that I think is really, really interesting. So, Shandré, maybe I'll come to you first on this one. And here's Mike's question. Many technologists and futurists believe that the blending of humans and robotics is inevitable. Our phones will give way to implanted chips. Can you discuss the exciting, terrifying ramifications of this? I mean, it's this point about this interaction between human and robotics. A broader issue is the interaction between technology and people, of course, but those robotics seem to us to be very, very present, very sort of physical, very much there in a more direct sense. First of all, should we be positive or negative, Shandré, about this?
I think we should be positive. Like the question was stating, it's inevitable. So we should rather embrace it and see how can we work with it? How can we mitigate the risks? How can we see past the risks? With every problem that we encounter, let's think of solutions. Let's think out of the box. Let's think, how can this actually become part of our reality? Because I think it's been years coming where people have been saying, this is what's going to be happening. And only now we're really seeing it take shape and take form. So I think definitely embracing it, but like I said in my opening statement, also thinking of what lens are we looking at it with.
Yeah, I've taken it. I hadn't really thought that through much, actually, Shandré. But I take your point, and I think you're right to emphasise it. Craig, let me come to you. I don't think it's any easier, this question, than the last one I asked you, but this one at least is Mike Gibbs' fault, Craig. It's a good question, though. This futurist, this thinking to the future about what this is going to look like. I suppose from what you said so far, it's limited. What would you say? Have I interpreted that correctly?
I think physical augmentation and use of, say, metal body enhancements or whatever is definitely going to be a thing in the future. Whether it's a good thing or not, there are going to be some people who go for that. If we have a look at the Japanese, they have this concept around their anime where they have these robotic kind of people who are assimilated into a machine and so on. I think it is going to be an issue. Certainly, if we have a look at the military, I'm sure they're pretty far down that road already. But for security, quite possibly, people can run faster, jump higher, and pull out tools out of their arm, that kind of thing. In the near future, no, but in 10 years' time, yeah, quite possibly.
Okay. And is that a good thing? Should we be pleased about this or worried about this, though, Craig?
Look, I personally don't want to modify my body in any way. And if somebody wants to do that, I would be very worried. Some people might see it as a great opportunity, though, to excel in various things and to do stuff that they've never been able to do. So, yeah, I think it does have some advantages for people. You obviously don't want to be volunteered for it. There's certainly ethical issues in terms of that.
Yeah, well, I'm going to come to ethical issues in a minute. Andrew, just your thoughts on this question first, this futuristic, because you put your barrier at 7 years. So maybe I'm going to ask you to just go a bit beyond that for a minute and think forward. Andrew?
Yeah, I think it definitely will happen, as Craig has said. And I think the initial part of it is going to be quite terrifying, because people are going to be experimenting and things are going to go wrong. You know, what happens if you bump your head and the chip in your brain disconnects, or there's a spark or something? You know, things like that are definitely going to cause some interesting things to happen over the sort of medium to long-term future. I think there's very good potential in what you can do, but there's also quite a bit of sort of, I'd say, nervousness on my part as to exactly what will happen and how it will happen. And I mean, if you look at how the cyber criminals have adapted to quite amazing cybersecurity issues that, or protections that we have today, you know, how are they going to adapt, you know, to these implants? I mean, that even goes to just the simple robots themselves. You know, if you can get control of it, or that implant, you can, you know, what are you going to make someone do, or prevent someone from seeing or knowing, or, you know, what damage can a robot do if it's compromised? So it will happen, but I would say I'm pretty skeptical about the benefits of it in the long term.
Skeptical about the benefits of combining in the way Mike says.
Yeah. So combining sort of implants and what have you, I'm a little skeptical. I mean, if we take a very long-term view, it's probably going to turn out to be a great thing, which happens. But you know, in the sort of, say, a 10-year period, I think there's going to be a lot of funny things happening. I mean, Elon Musk is already talking about Neuralink and implanting chips in people's brains. And if you look what happened at Tesla, there could be some accidents happening, I suppose you could say, in the next few years.
It seems horrific to me, I've got to tell you. But anyway, I mean, Andrew, let me just stick with you, because you raised that point about affairs. I just want to deal with this, John Reeves. We've previously done a webinar on the insider risk and about the scale of the problem. I was actually at a cyber conference the other day, and they were saying it's not a case anymore of people hacking in, it's a people of logging in because they manipulate individuals all the time. I mean, this insider risk, this is a massive issue. John Reeves' question is, don't robots potentially offer a serious weak point here? Aren't we magnifying the problem as much as we're offering a potential solution on that very specific issue of the insider risk? Andrew?
Yes, definitely they are. As you mentioned, humans are the weakest link in the whole cybersecurity chain at the moment, with phishing emails and all that kind of stuff. And in South Africa, especially, whether it's through bribery or intimidation, insiders provide a lot of information to criminal gangs and syndicates. So, I mean, if you have a robot there and there's a flaw or a vulnerability in the robots, the software or the hardware, they can, you know, the robots will be connected to a network, obviously. Even implants will be connected to a network, and that can obviously give you access to the network and all the things that come with that. But it also allows you to, you know, the robot might walk into your control room or your security operations center and, to use a silly example, spill coffee over the guy who's doing the cyber surveillance or making sure people don't hack the system, and then give those people access. So, you know, while the guy's cleaning coffee, people can break into the system. As I said, a silly example, but
well, I'll tell you what. Now, Craig, what I need you to tell me is Andrew's exaggerating the position. It's nowhere near as going to be as bad as that, because that sounds horrific.
I don't think he is. If we have a look at current security systems, they're full of holes. We had a demonstration from a specialist who said, well, let's have a look at camera makes. He did a search for camera makes. He used a default password, 000 or whatever, and promptly logged into a major site purely through the camera. Now, if you're doing that through cameras, literally on the fly, and you have access, like Andrew says, to net-linked equipment and electronics, then literally anything is possible. So even just a simple jamming kind of system is potentially going to create issues. I would be very concerned about the security involved in any kind of robotic interaction.
Right. Shandré, it's up to you to rescue this. Are you as concerned as Andrew and Craig?
Yes, in fact, not only can all these things happen, but it can be recorded, and it would be it would serve as so much evidence as well as what actually happened, and risk so many confidentiality and privacy risks as well. So I agree with them and put it forth as well that it would be worse off because this can even be recorded and shared as well.
Yeah. Okay, privacy. Let's just deal with this, because one of the questions I got in advance was about privacy, as I was telling you before we started the webinar. So this whole area of confidentiality of information data is massive in many parts of the world. I'm not sure about South Africa, but you can let me know in a minute, Shandré. Should we be particularly concerned in the context of using robots about privacy data protection? Is there a particular risk with robots, or is it part of a broader concern just about the amassing data?
I think it is part of a broader concern, but also, I don't know, I suppose, like you said, many countries are moving towards educating people about privacy and confidentiality risks. So people are also becoming more educated about the risks that are involved with their private information, such as identification numbers, credit card information, etc., and how that can be used to their disadvantage. So I think it is part of a broader risk, but I think also the movement that we're going forth in is also educating people that these risks are there and your information is very important and it can be used against you.
Yeah, I mean, sounds, I mean, one of the outlines for this webinar, Andrew, was about the extent to which robots are a threat to humans and about the way the downside can be managed. I wonder if I could ask you all for a comment on this. I mean, in fact, I'm not good at pronouncing names the best of the time. So watch me do badly at this. Daiketaje Moniyapo. Would any of you be able to correct me on a better pronunciation? No, you're all, well, no, let me, he said, he makes this point about the Neurolinks and this managing, though, this broader issue of managing the downside. Regulation, Andrew, legal reform, education, where do we go with this?
Managing the downside is going to get more difficult as technology gets more advanced. You know, for one thing, regulation definitely is required. It'll probably be a case of over-regulating. I think the EU is already starting something like that, over-regulating to start with and then sort of easing off. But I don't think the issue is with sort of legitimate companies. I mean, you get your Googles and Facebooks who obviously are not, let's say, privacy concerned with your privacy, no matter what they say. Not only them, but there's lots of companies like that. But I think there's a serious issue in terms of the illegitimate companies or the criminal element. You know, once they're in, there's no stopping them and no telling what they can do. And the more advanced technology becomes, the easier it will be for them to make use of private information for whatever nefarious purposes. I mean, credit card numbers and identity numbers are already out there. I'm talking about South Africa now. I mean, there's, you know, there's basically been no official or authoritative cybersecurity protection in South Africa until now, even though there is a very law which is similar to GDPR. It's proving to be very difficult to get people to, or the authorities to do something. And I think that's only going to get worse. From the developer's perspective, the difference between what we've been doing now in terms of software and hardware development is they would have to focus very intently on the quality of what they develop. There's no potential, especially when you look at robots and and implants and Neuralink or whatever, there is no potential to say, okay, this didn't work, this crashed the system, let's do an upgrade and try again. you know, that the quality issue needs to be addressed up front, and the security issue, the common term they use is secure by design. It needs to be really secure by design up front and not relying on endless Tuesday upgrades to try and make the thing work.
Yeah, actually, Bruce Robertson was complimenting Craig on mentioned security by design, and clearly a big concept. Craig, let me just come to you on that. This issue of, can we regulate our way out of this? On, if we can't, what else should we be doing? I mean, it's a big deal, this one, isn't it? How are we going to respond to these very real risks?
I think we definitely already seen that with the questions around AI. And the knowledge searching and the ChatGPTs and Google equivalents and so on. And people are coming out to talk about it. In terms of robotics, I think we're going to enter into a little bit of a Wild West, to be honest. I think there's not that much regulation. I think people are pushing the boundaries and developing as quickly as they can. We're going to have trouble keeping up with the progress from a regulation basis. And if we have a look at, in the old days, somebody standing outside your garden and with a camera and looking at your house with a video recorder, it now has become so much more subtle. You can do it electronically through your phone. You can do it through a drone. You can do it through little spider creatures, probably, that in the future that can crawl along the ground and check things. You've been tracked effectively almost continuously, and robots are just going to enhance that. And take it further, and then act on those potential issues as well.
Good to ask a criminologist very briefly about regulation. Shandré, what's your thought? Are you more optimistic than Andrew and Craig are?
I think with regulation, what's also important is that legislation and policy also need to come on board, and the implementation of legislation and policy as well, because they work hand in hand. You know, our country, South Africa, is very good at making legislation, not so good at implementation. So I think that's also very important to think about as well, is that our legislations would also need to be updated. As Andrew said, only recently we've actually had legislation on privacy, and it's only recently being trying to be implemented. So I think not only in our country, in South Africa, but also other countries, legislation, policy needs to be updated and implemented.
Yeah, fair enough. None of that easy, of course, particularly, as Craig says, in a fast-moving world. I wonder whether I could come back to you, Craig. Mike Crow asked a question. Is a drone a robot? And how do you distinguish what a robot is? Because, I mean, if you're going to regulate it, you've got to know what it is. I mean, Craig, is it obvious what a robot is?
I had exactly this question before coming into this webinar, and I was trying to work out what is a robot, because if we have a look at a motor vehicle factory, it's very obvious which is the robots and which are the people. And the drone issue, I thought, yeah, it is a robot. It's effectively an electronic device acting out on instructions and doing certain things. You have these R2D2 kind of little machines were going around in Dubai for information purposes. That you can easily relate to as a robot. But a small device that moves along the ground, a drone, a major construction building or whatever, those can all be robots as far as I'm concerned. It's a very flexible definition.
Yeah, interesting. Of course, that complicates the process of regulating it. Very briefly, Andrew, your thoughts on what is a robot? I mean, is a drone a robot?
Yes, it is. Although the law says they have to be driven by someone, automated drones are a real thing, and you know that'll do the same as a guy running around in Dubai giving you information. Well, won't do that, but it's almost more insidious, because you know you don't know that it's there all the time, and it can record sound and video, etc. And as to what is a robot, I mean, in the Russia-Ukraine war at the moment, Russia are using autonomous armored vehicles which communicate with each other and work together to achieve an objective. So, you know, a robot can look like something we already know, like a car, or it can be, like Craig said, some little thing that flies around with a tiny little camera, or a spider taking pictures of what's happening inside your factory or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. Let me just sit with you very, very briefly, if I might. James McDonald has got a question. Are physical robots likely to be more cost effective than a security and a human on site? So you've already pointed out the different sort of, in general terms, different expectations of each. Is one advantage going to be that a robot's going to be much cheaper?
No.
Just articulate that if you wouldn't mind very briefly.
Yes, no. Looking at on a long-term perspective, technology will get cheaper, and then it might be cheaper than the current systems. But if you're looking at a robot as some autonomous thing, if you're looking at it as a robot as a camera that's supported by AI, then the cost effectiveness becomes more real, and it will. I mean, it won't be the cost. The purchase cost won't be cheaper than a robot. I mean, a human. But the long-term cost will definitely be lower than a human.
Very quickly, Shandré, to come in on that. You're on mute, Shandré.
I wanted to add there that also in some countries like our country, we talk about minimum wage, and that's often what the security guard at the gate is getting. But in other companies, we talk about a living wage, like in the UK. So we're not yet there at the living wage, we're still on the minimum wage. And therefore, I tend to support Andrew where he says, actually, it's not cheaper at the moment.
Craig, I'll give you a chance just to make a final comment on this this issue of cost and opportunity on robots.
I think when we have a look at the introduction of cameras into a site, a physical site, rather than having somebody patrol the perimeter, you can look at those cameras from a control room. You can automatically detect any transgressions or whatever. That's very cost effective. Now, you don't really want to send a robot out to do exactly the same thing that the security guard was doing before, unless that robot can actually intervene as well, because we haven't got cameras yet that can intervene in a situation. I think there are roles where things can be automated, that robots can be more cost effective. But are they going to replace humans under those kinds of conditions? You still need people to make decisions on situations that come up, and that's typically going to be a human.
Yeah, funny enough, actually, when I go out with ex-offenders and we go and look at sites and they assess it from an offender's point of view, the thing they're most worried about above everything else is someone who can actually stop them and arrest them, someone physical there. That's what they're most worried about. As long as they get away, that's ideal. Get away with the goods, even better, but just make sure you get away. Bruce Robinson just makes the point that, of course, laws are only so good for the law abiding. There's a limit as far as the non-law abiding are concerned. Okay, thank you so much indeed, panel. We could have gone on. Fascinating insights. I'm sure this is a topic that we'll be coming back to in due course. Let me just say a few final points, if I might, on a few things. So just to say that the few OSPAs events coming up, the Benelux entries are closing on the 3rd of August, the Tackling Economic Crime Awards on the 8th of August, Southeast Asia, our first ever Southeast Asia OSPAs, closes on the 29th of August. Also to say, we're back on the 6th of July. My colleague, Dr. Janice Goldstraw-Wright, will be chairing the session on tackling healthcare fraud, uncontrollable beasts, or examples of good practice. And look out for the 20th of July as well, looking at sustainability issues and their implications for security. So thank you very much indeed for joining me. Thank you once again to the panel. Thank you for the audience for your good questions. I'm very grateful to Shrey in the background, who's been managing the technology. So we're back on the 6th of July, Janice. I'm back on the 20th of July with sustainability. Until we meet again, wherever you are in the world, stay safe.